Chapter 3: The Changes Within. Greetings, beloveds, we are the founders. Now that you have had an overview of some of what to expect in the coming years, and have been briefed on the nature of time, we will go into detail on what you may experience in the years to come. To recap, we are making some assumptions as we begin this chapter. First, we are assuming you are all members of the enlightened humans who are inheriting this beautiful planet. Second, a great many of you are also on the path of ascension. However, you will find that many of the issues described in this and the following chapters will relate to you regardless of your level of vibration. Note: you have, by now, noticed that we often repeat ourselves. This is not bad editing on the part of the channel, but an intentional move designed to reinforce the more important ideas. Now, let us proceed. The catalysts for change. In spiritual terms, a catalyst is a trigger mechanism for moving evolution forward. In some cases, a catalyst will trigger a mutation in the DNA or radical transformation in the consciousness of a species. On virtually every level of human experience, you have, at this time, catalysts prompting you to make changes at a fundamental level of your being. From a purely third density perspective, your species cannot continue on its present course. The story given in Chapter 1 illustrates what will happen to the third density world if you repeatedly ignore the warning signs inherent within your lifestyle choices. To review briefly. You are running out of pure, clean water and fresh organic food. Your climate is changing, partly from interference by humankind and partly from natural cycles. Your population is currently unable to feed itself and provide a basic standard of living for about 1/4 of its people. You continue to use fossil fuels and nuclear power even though you have had recent major accidents involving these products. You have fouled your air and water to the point that your beloved Earth is having difficulty correcting the problem. Your food is contaminated and contains dozens of chemicals your bodies do not know how to process. Your physical bodies have compromised immune systems due to stressful lifestyles. These stressors include constant noise, electromagnetic pollution from radio and mobile phone towers, bombardment with media and advertising, a pop culture that promotes consumerism and violence, a political system bought and paid for by special interests, corporate monopolies that genetically alter crops and promote excessive spraying of pesticides, a corrupted medical system that values profits over people, weapons of war that spray radioactive chemicals into the air, depleted uranium, etc., weather modification substances sprayed into your atmosphere, hydraulic fracturing of shale to produce natural gas that pollutes the groundwater, constant small spills of petroleum products along with a few major spills, leaking nuclear reactors, depletion of the ozone layer, and exhaustion of natural resources to satisfy the ever-increasing cravings and desires for more. The above paragraph ought to be enough of a catalyst to trigger major changes in behavior among human beings, but most continue to march off the cliff, perhaps taking quick note of a problem and occasionally considering a solution, but then rationalizing the issue away and going back to sleep. Souls are conditioned to believe they are mostly powerless and have very little say in what takes place in the world. This sense of powerlessness stems from identification with the body and ego-mind complex. This identification with form, which began during the soul's descent into matter, is the primary reason nearly 3/4 of humanity will likely leave the Earth over the next 20 to 30 years. From a fourth density perspective, your own souls are the catalysts behind the changes you are seeking to make. Many of you are what is commonly called old souls, and have had enough of war, poverty, misery, suffering, control, oppression, etc. You want to learn new lessons of love, unconditional acceptance, responsibility for Mother Earth, and living harmoniously with the environment. Even without the specter of environmental disaster, you would be unable to continue living a third density lifestyle. You are no longer interested in which brand of shaving cream or deodorant is best, or how to make more money than your neighbor. Long ago you put away the insane idea that the one with the most toys somehow wins in life. The things that excite you now involve personal growth, spiritual unfoldment and entering into deep, bonded, truly loving relationships with others who are also committed to their soul evolution. As an enlightened human, you seek out experiences that will bring to the surface those patterns and issues that need to be healed and integrated. Of course, your human ego might still resist and even complain at times, but the dominant force in your life is the desire to grow into greater wisdom through compassionate service. From outside the earthly drama, there are a number of catalysts contributing to the changes. These catalysts go all the way to the source of everything. You could say that there is a divine fiat or commandment that all life on earth shall evolve or go elsewhere. This is in answer to the call of Mother Earth herself, who is a living, conscious being existing on 7 dimensions. As the 3 portals of 2012, 2017 and 2030, discussed earlier, are factored into the equation, you find all these catalysts for growth are converging in the present time period. The cause of the darkness on Earth. The cause of darkness on Earth goes back to original cause. Because Earth has been a third-density planet for millions of years, souls that incarnate here usually forget their divine nature and become identified with materiality, at least to some extent. This has been part of the desire of souls exploring the lower densities, to become temporarily enmeshed in such worlds in order to experience them to their fullest. Unfortunately, many souls who desire to free themselves from identification with the material are finding it quite difficult. A lot of this difficulty stems from the fact that, laggard, souls have come to Earth and have kept the overall vibration here very low due to their slow learning curve or outright refusal to learn. Our Creator, being infinitely compassionate, has given souls millions of years to learn lessons on Earth, but now the very life of lower density Earth is threatened by those souls who have refused to turn away from destructive behaviors. These are the dark ones who have been stuck in a negative view of reality for eons. From their distorted perspective, God is the enemy to be overcome through force and might. Deep within their consciousness is rage and terror associated with the original descent into matter, original cause. As a consequence of identifying with form, they have come to the erroneous conclusion that they are small, helpless, powerless beings all alone in a hostile universe. As a result of this belief in separation from God, they feel they must control and manipulate others in order to feel powerful and meaningful. Most of you have been on Earth during the rise and fall of the significant civilizations, such as Pangaea, Lemuria, Atlantis and the present. Every time you have climbed to the heights of personal achievement, something has come along and seemed to sabotage your efforts. Sometimes this has been a so-called natural disaster, but more often it has been the result of invasion by negative extraterrestrials, or decay from within the culture itself. Usually, the so-called civilized world descended into warfare and oppressive, dictatorial regimes designed to keep people locked in fear and servitude. Why do you think things fall apart just when it seems they are getting good? The answer lies in the nature of denial and suppression of primal experiences. Most of you never completely resolved the feelings that arose during original cause. Fearful of reenacting the descent into darkness and compression, you locked that fear deep within your subconscious mind and pretended everything was just fine. Having this suppressed negativity did not make it go away. It still worked behind the scenes according to the law of attraction, meaning that your soul would attract negative experiences in order to mirror what was unresolved within the psyche. Dear creators, if you did not have unresolved psychological issues lurking within, you would not attract negative ETs, natural disasters, or leaders that betray you or try to control you. Attempts by avatars to turn things around. How are these issues resolved? Until recently, it was very difficult to heal original cause and its myriad of associated disorders, such as fear of abandonment, guilt, shame, depression and despair. Seeing the predicament you were in, teachers were sent to Earth to help you remember that you are more than a body-mind personality. They reminded you that you are powerful, creative, spiritual beings, capable of remembering your true magnificence and manifesting it on this planet. These teachers became some of the strongest catalysts for change, even though many of them were met with great opposition. They became mirrors not only of that which you had carefully concealed within and were afraid to look at, but also mirrors of your greatness. However, instead of seeing your own greatness reflected in the avatars and holy men and women of times past, you fell to idolatry and worship, thinking that salvation comes from the blessing of the guru or whimsical granting of pardon or forgiveness by the master, as in the adage, Christ died for your sins. Believing that one manifestation of God in the form of a human soul is the key to salvation, you refused to look within for the answers, and once again, you failed to move forward significantly along the spiral of evolution. The intricacies of free will. Most of the industrial and technological achievements made by humanity during the four great civilizations, Pangaea, Lemuria, Atlantis and the present, occurred due to intervention by ETs, and often by those star races that did not fully understand and respect human free will. In other words, they interfered with human evolution, often out of concern for your well-being, but with disregard for your soul lessons. Due to the Creator's infinite compassion, it would not have made sense to deny some souls their lessons in order to save other souls. After all, many souls are young and immature and actually want to learn about war, poverty, misery, suffering, oppression, control and identification with materiality. A compassionate God would not deny them the privilege of using their free will to learn about these things. Therefore, a plan was set in motion to give all souls what they truly desire. In order to achieve this, several new worlds have been set up to receive the souls who can no longer match the frequencies of the new Earth. As souls exit their human bodies, they will reincarnate on these other worlds and continue learning about war, poverty, misery, suffering, oppression, control and materiality. Those souls who desire to live in true peace and prosperity will remain with the Earth, or in some cases ascend and go to other planets that accommodate peace and prosperity. A small number of souls are ready to complete all their soul lessons as mortal humans, and these souls will go through the spiral of ascension in the years to come. This is the most exciting time ever on Earth because the catalysts for change are converging and causing a major shift in all areas of life. Within a few short years, many of the hallowed institutions of the old ways will crumble, and new ways of life will be welcomed by those choosing to remain on Earth. Spiritual awakening. Those souls moving on into fourth and fifth densities will undergo a profound spiritual awakening. Since about 1950, at the start of the galactic shift, a lot of souls have been experiencing higher states of consciousness. For the most part, very few have been able to hold the higher frequencies due to the tremendous amount of negativity present on Earth. You must remember, dear creators, that Earth has been a melting pot for souls from all over the universe, including many of the renegades and rejects from other worlds. Put another way, souls that do not fit into the order and structure of a particular world have often been sent to Earth because up until the 2012 portal shift, Earth had accepted souls from all levels of vibration. Yes, you have souls from every conceivable level of consciousness here, from extremely ignorant to sublimely enlightened. You also have souls who have dedicated themselves to paths of darkness and so-called evil. In this case, the word evil means having a conscious intent to hold souls back on their spiritual evolution. Because Earth's own survival is now threatened, from a lower density point of view, a series of divine dispensations, detailed in Earth Changes and Beyond, have been granted, allowing the Earth to move into fourth density. This implies that only those souls vibrating at fourth density and above are allowed to incarnate on Earth, from December 21, 2012 onward. Those souls who do decide to remain with the Earth are going through a spiritual awakening. For some, it begins with coming to a realization that there is more to life than the 9-to-5 workplace and raising a family. The popularized rite of passage known as the midlife crisis is an example of a partial spiritual awakening that occurs in much of your population. Simply put, after working hard for 10, 20 or 30 years and making their way up the corporate ladder, or perhaps raising a family and now the kids are grown up and out of the house, such souls start to ponder the meaning of it all. The job that seemed so promising in the beginning now fails to fulfill an inner longing that the soul just cannot quite put his finger on. The one raising children might have a wonderful relationship with the grown kids, but feels there is now another purpose calling her. We have used the traditional male and female roles here, but we are quite aware the roles can be reversed. Distractions from your spiritual path. In some of your earlier tribal cultures, there was a time set aside for men and women to begin their spiritual paths, usually after working and raising children. Typically, there would be some rite of passage or ceremony honoring the various phases of tribal life. Often at a very early age, the men and women would go to work, hunting, gathering, or creating useful things for the tribe, and then at some point they would marry or bond and raise a family. Once the children reached a certain age, they would begin their spiritual rituals and rites. For women, it was often at menopause. In your modern cultures, you have lost much of the tribal ceremonies and rites of passage. In place of rites of passage, you have endless activities to keep you busy and focused on getting ahead in the world. You might combine spiritual activities with other tasks or try to cram them into your busy schedule. It is not uncommon for us to meet students who are going to school at night, working during the day, raising a family, and going to church or some spiritual group whenever possible. This, combined with constant media bombardment and social engagements, makes for a very stressful lifestyle. Perhaps you take an hour or two off every Sunday to contemplate God or the universe, and then it's back to the daily grind for another week. The soul nudges the personality back into alignment. For many, spiritual awakening comes in a most unexpected way. As the body begins to rebel against the stressful lifestyle mentioned above, illness may result and force the soul to slow down and reprioritize. Many a near-death experience has triggered spiritual awakening. Such souls often dedicate their lives to service after being given a second lease on life. In most cases, near-death accidents and illnesses are the soul's last-ditch effort to awaken the soul to his or her true purpose and mission on Earth. Often such a soul has failed to listen and acknowledge the more subtle approaches the soul may have used in the past to get his or her attention. Whether it is through midlife crisis, sudden accident or illness, or near-death experience, a significant percentage of such souls begin to realize there is a greater purpose underlying the endless busyness of life. Very advanced souls may not need to create such dire circumstances in order to begin the awakening process. They might be predisposed toward the more esoteric sciences. In some cases, they may have been fortunate enough to be able to choose parents who were already metaphysically inclined and thereby grew up around holistic healers and trance mediums. In other cases, they naturally gravitate toward individuals and groups who are on a spiritual path. The earth changes now taking place offer an exceptional opportunity for awakening. Some souls are seeing the writing on the wall, and are realizing a radical new approach to life is being called for at this time. In desperation, they turn from the crumbling third-density world, looking for a way out of the mess. This is where the lightworkers of the world come in handy. Just as confused souls are looking for the lightworkers are often looking for their unique way of expressing their gifts in the world. Before we go into more detail on the ways the lightworkers can help, Let us take a look at some of the ways Mother Earth will be healing herself in the years to come. The purging on Earth. Virtually all of your major religions portray a time of tribulation, apocalypse, Armageddon, or Judgment Day. Many erroneously postulate that God is going to separate the righteous from the sinner, or wheat from the chaff, or meek and mild from the aggressors. It is understandable that in your limited perception, you would believe that some outside force is capable of passing judgment upon your species. The natural laws of the universe, which include the higher spiritual laws as well as the laws of Newtonian physics, Einsteinian time, space, quantum theory, superstring theory, metaphysics, genetics, etc., are all part of the workings of the multidimensional omniverse, or multiverse, or universe of universes. While it is overly simplistic to say that disobedience of God's laws is the cause of suffering, it is certainly true that ignorance of natural laws is a major contributor to the misery of the majority of humanity. When your human body gets sick, its defenses generate antibodies and all sorts of biochemical reactions, such as fever, to repel the invading organisms. When your Mother Earth gets overrun with ignorant souls who seek to plunder her resources and dominate her life forms, she mounts defenses as well. Life seeks balance. When things get too far out of balance, correction must be made. This is not the wrath of God, but is the consequence of ignoring or fighting against natural laws. A soul that has not yet learned how to levitate and fly is subject to the law of gravity. If he falls off a building and hurts his body, does he blame God? Does he believe God is angry with him and is punishing him? Or does he simply need to learn about the law of gravity and have respect for it until such time as he learns other laws that supersede it? Such is the case with humanity. The following is a list of the catalysts and causes for the purging which is now in the process of occurring on planet Earth. Table number 1. Reasons for the purging taking place on Earth. Mother Earth seeks to balance herself. The Lightworkers' desire to live in peace and harmony. Souls are completing their lessons of karma, reincarnation. Divine dispensations have been granted. The Earth is moving through the 3 portals. The galactic shift is underway. Benevolent ETs are interacting with Earth. Natural periodic mutations are being triggered. Souls' desire to be free of misery and suffering. Humanity has discovered how to destroy itself, the planet. Your Mother Earth has 4th density as its dominant mode of expression. This started on December 21, 2012. That means all souls who incarnate upon her now must be aligned with the 4th density principles of co-creation, cooperation, harmonious living, respect for the environment, desire to grow and evolve, and awareness of themselves as conscious beings on a spiral of evolution and ascension. Souls currently in residence who are not able or willing to embrace the above qualities will have a short time in which to get their affairs in order before exiting their 3rd density bodies, through the process of death and reincarnation, and taking up residence on another 3rd density planet. This period of time will likely encompass the 3 portals concluding in 2030. In a few cases, souls may be granted additional time to get their affairs in order, but all incoming, reincarnating, souls from 2012 onward are already vibrating at 4th density or higher. In other words, Earth only accepts those souls who have a vibratory state above 4.00 on this channel's frequency scale. The changes in the chemical composition of Earth and her atmosphere, along with solar storms and flares, and the electromagnetic fluctuations entering Earth from the center of the galaxy, will all contribute to mutations in the cells of human beings. For those who have raised their vibration and kept their immune systems intact, these mutations will be welcomed and accepted as the catalysts for change that bring the soul to a higher state of being. For those who refuse to grow and evolve, who are deeply attached to materialism, or who do not feel ready on a soul level to embrace the new Earth, The mutations will cause immune system failure, opening the body to attack from exotic viruses, bacteria, molds, fungi, toxic chemicals, radiation, etc. Our compassionate Creator is truly giving every soul what it desires. Souls who are not ready for fourth density Earth will not have to suffer as they vainly try to learn lessons they are not ready for. The only suffering involved in this plan is that incurred as a result of resistance by the ego. Those who are already in fourth density will finally get to experience the joy of living in a world of plenty where human well-being is the highest priority along with the well-being of Mother Earth. Immune system failure in third density souls. As you know, dear creators, the immune system is your body's defense mechanism against harmful organisms, including viruses, bacteria, molds, fungi, parasites, toxic chemicals, radiation and electromagnetic pollution. In your modern world, you have plenty of invaders ready to take up residence in your body. Immune systems are depleted through many factors, including stressful lifestyles, poor diet, lack of exercise, associating with negatively oriented people, and especially holding within the self-core negative belief systems and unresolved emotional issues. You are, perhaps, familiar with the concept of default. Spiritually speaking, to default means to go along with the prevailing energy and consciousness of that which surrounds you. In most cases, that means that you will become more like the third density negative souls because they are still the dominant group on your planet. If you do nothing, meaning that you do not meditate or engage in holistic healing practices and do not surround yourself with positively oriented people, then most likely your vibratory level will drop to near the average level of humans on Earth. Therefore, you must be proactive on your spiritual path. This means seeking out those who have a high level of vibration, consciously surrounding yourself with beautiful, high-frequency places, objects and energies, such as melodious classical or New Age music, positively charged crystals, flower gardens, flower essences, vibrant trees, etc. It is not absolutely necessary to have a structured meditation practice, but there must be some quiet time each day when you can retreat from the busy world. A walk in nature is a wonderful and easy way to get centered. It not only gives you exercise, but also helps quiet the mind. If you are aware of negative psychological patterns, core negative beliefs and traumatic emotions from your past, then some form of daily therapy or healing is called for. This does not mean you must spend every free moment processing or analyzing, but it does mean staying conscious every time one of these patterns asserts itself and interferes with your enjoyment of life. It is important to watch feelings as they arise, without judging them. Simply allow them to be. Do not label the feelings. If you go deeply into the now moment with a feeling, you recognize it as a unique pattern of energy. It might be a very strong energy that ripples through the body, or makes it tingle, or creates fatigue and soreness. Again, be careful not to label the feelings. Try to remain with the energy movement itself, rather than the descriptive words. As you take care of yourself daily, your immune system will increase in strength and remain strong, and you will survive the earth changes physically. In fact, you will thrive. As the portals come and go, each one will strengthen your immune system if you are aligned with the frequencies coming into the earth from the higher dimensions. For those souls who do not take care of themselves, the constantly increasing stresses of the modern world will take a toll on the immune system. In addition, the mutations associated with the opening of the portals will greatly accelerate this decline. Many souls will decide that they cannot make the transition into fourth density, and illness or disease will manifest in the body as a precursor to departing the earth plane a few weeks, months or years later. This is the soul saying, "It's time to get your affairs in order. We have a new assignment for you somewhere else." Often the ego, personality is not in agreement with the soul's decision and fights it. In the case of a third-density soul with a declining immune system, this will often take the form of lingering chronic illness and gradual deterioration of bodily faculties. The body and soul are in conflict. The will of the ego, personality, may try to force the body to heal because it does not want to die. Yet the soul gently keeps pushing at the body to give up the fight. Due to free will, a soul can change its mind and decide to stay, but the longer the ego, personality and soul are at odds, the harder it is to reconcile the situation. Your world is not set up to handle large numbers of souls with declining health conditions. Already, your medical institutions are on the verge of breakdown. The cumulative effects of many drugs exacerbate the problem, as does the financial drain on individuals and governments due to the need for constant care of souls by doctors and nurses. In the years to come on third-density Earth, it will become harder and harder to find clean air, food and water, and this, coupled with large-scale immune system failure, will create a negative spiral, especially in the cities where people live in close quarters. Diseases that once seemed non-contagious will spread due to the declining immune function. Viruses will mutate prior to, during and after the opening of the portals. Toxic metal and radiation buildup will take their toll. Due to free will, we cannot say with certainty exactly how many souls will exit the Earth and how fast they will go. It appears that the population of Earth will reach a peak of around 8 billion, sometime before 2020, and then start declining. This will be due not only to a higher number of deaths, but also to declining birth rates. Many of the same factors that destroy the human immune system will also create partial or total sterility in young females. Included are many of your genetically modified grains and the pesticides used to grow them, as well as many of the chemicals used in processed foods. These pollutants have a cumulative effect, and many scientists are not yet aware of the long-term consequences of genetic modification and certain commonly used chemical food additives. Since 1950, about 5% of humanity has turned away from the third-density path of deterioration and into the fourth-density path of enlightenment. While that may not seem like much, it involves over 300 million souls. A few million more are likely to make the transition from third to fourth density during the portal openings. If you live in the country, the slow-motion cataclysm of immune system failure will not be all that noticeable. Of course, many of your neighbors will get terminal illnesses or complain of chronic conditions. However, this is already occurring to some degree. You might simply notice that a lot more people are coming down with unexplained illnesses or new forms of cancer. For those in the cities, the effect will be a lot more dramatic. In some cases, dead bodies will pile up in the streets because hospitals, morgues and cemeteries will become overwhelmed. It is important to remind you, dear creators, that this is only a tragedy from a third-density point of view. The departing souls will be getting what they truly desire, a fresh start on a planet more suited to their level of vibration. The transition period will be a bit rocky as their egos slowly give up the battle to stay alive. Your response as enlightened souls is to give the dying as much love and compassion as you can. Forgive them for not taking better care of themselves. There is no fault or blame here. Just affirm that every soul on earth is taking the right steps to ensure his or her highest and best soul growth and happiness. The healing of fourth density souls. Many of you in fourth density have had nagging health issues that just do not seem to go away. There is a common reason for this, but it is not easy to explain in your language. Nevertheless, let us try it this time. You may have heard the expression, "You are surrogates for the birth of the new earth." What does this actually mean? Some of you have used the expression, "I am taking on the karma of Mother Earth and that is why I have been unable to lose weight or clear these health issues." These are true statements from a fourth density perspective. To some extent, you are acting as mirrors for other souls to help them see what is taking place within the self. Because you are all connected, you cannot really be separate from those who are suffering, and so you do take on a small piece of that suffering. A part of you aches when they ache and hurts when they hurt. While you cannot separate yourself from suffering, you can stop identifying with it. A healthy way of stating it is thus: I am a powerful, creative, healthy spiritual being temporarily experiencing the suffering of humanity. You are aware of the suffering, you feel it, you know it, and to some extent you become it. But you never forget that you are much more than the suffering. In other words, you can fully experience something without believing that it is the truth of who you are. Instead of saying, I am suffering, you would say, I have chosen to experience suffering. The way to heal the suffering of the world and the maladies within your own body, mind, personality is to shine the light of compassion directly into the darkest places within and without. As you expose the dark places to light, they will either depart or move toward the light and become absorbed by it. If they depart, then bless them on their way and return to yourself. Ultimately, all dark negative beliefs are illusions and will disappear in the bright light of truth. Table 2 below details the most common blocks to enlightenment. You will note that most of these are related and are often the same state of consciousness expressed in different ways. Table 2: the most common blocks to enlightenment. Belief in separation from God or Source. Identification with the ego, or physical body, mind, self-judgment. Belief that something is wrong with self, guilt and shame. Fear of God, fear of life. Belief that one is not good enough, belief that one is unworthy. Belief that life is a struggle. Fear of death. Belief that one is not safe, demand for outer security, fear of harm or physical pain, fear of darkness, belief that there is not enough, belief in scarcity, need for approval from others. Fear of rejection, fear of being alone, resentment, holding grievances. Emotional attachments. Habits and addictions. Fear of disappointment, unrealistic expectations, blind acceptance of doctrine or dogma, attachment to religious beliefs. Distractions of the world, laziness, amnesia, possession by negative entities. Possession by negative thought forms of the world, etheric imprints and implants from past lifetimes, childhood and past life trauma. Lack of discipline and motivation. We are sure you can add more of your own to this list. Recommended healing and therapy techniques. There are many techniques for healing, and we will not go into detail on every one of them, but we will share a few of our favorites at this time. Keep in mind that the optimal frequency of application of these techniques will vary from soul to soul, so feel free to experiment with the regularity of practice. In some cases, these techniques can be practiced on your own, while in other cases, you can purchase a CD or MP3 file and listen without the need to employ a health professional. In other cases, the techniques are best conducted by a licensed or trained therapist or healer. We encourage you to use all these approaches to maximize your well-being. Alpha Theta Meditation. This is a basic technique that is at the root of guided visualization and hypnotherapy. The idea is that by taking a soul into a deeply meditative state, the brain waves of that soul will enter the alpha or theta range. It has been shown that souls emanating alpha and theta brainwaves are much more creative and able to direct energy than souls emanating beta brainwaves. During an alpha-theta meditation, the client is taken into deep meditation using a hypnotherapy technique commonly known as standard induction. Specific autosuggestions are given to help the client relax, including the visualization of a favorite place in nature. In more sophisticated versions of this technique, the client is instructed to interact with a human version of his or her own higher self that acts as a spirit guide during the process. While in this deep state of mind, a number of additional techniques can be administered, including the visualization of specific goals and objectives as well as spiritual healing. Emphasis is placed on the safety of the technique, and portions of the induction are specifically targeted toward maximum safety. Often an intention is stated before the session. Always included in the intention is that the experience will be for the client's highest and best soul growth, happiness and well-being. Reprogramming the subconscious. This is a specific application of alpha-theta meditation whereby the client goes into a deep state and consciously uses reprogramming techniques to clear out negative core beliefs from the subconscious mind. One such technique involves the use of a computer screen to bring up negative programming. The user then hits the delete key to remove the beliefs that no longer serve him or her. To some, that may seem like an overly simplistic approach, but remember, dear creators, that the subconscious mind takes things literally. If it is being instructed to delete a program, it does so faithfully, under the right therapeutic conditions. Once core negative beliefs are removed, positive autosuggestions are added. Affirmations must always be in present tense. The present tense can be in the form of active or passive verbs. An example of an active autosuggestion would be, I am now experiencing my true innocence. An example of a passive autosuggestion would be, I am innocent. Most reprogramming techniques should be repeated often to increase their effectiveness, since clients usually receive constant reinforcement of negative programming from the world that can reintroduce the old negative beliefs. Remember our discussion on default. Forgiveness and release. This is another simple technique, but very powerful. The client is instructed to think about 1 to 3 people that he or she may not have completely forgiven. The litmus test for knowing whether or not complete forgiveness has been achieved is simple. If you feel anything other than pure unconditional love for a person when you think of him or her, then you have not completely forgiven that person. Pay particularly close attention to the way you feel in your body when you visualize the person you are seeking to forgive. Look for tightness in the chest, a sinking feeling in the stomach, energy patterns of sadness or regret, or perhaps just a slight irritation. Also look for egotistical arrogance, such as an inner response, I am so glad to be me. I would not want to be this person for all the tea in China. While that may be true, usually thoughts of this nature are laden with judgments that you are somehow superior to the person you are forgiving. In this case, you might really be thinking, I forgive the sorry wretch. If your forgiveness is not genuine, go back to deep breathing and ask your God presence within to help you reach true forgiveness. Then return to the process. In the forgiveness technique, clients visualize the souls they are forgiving and imagine such souls are sitting in front of them at about arm's length. Then there is a withhold process, and the soul in front of the client is lifted into the heavens on a golden beam of light. After the processes with others are completed, forgiveness is directed toward the self. This process is done differently and involves declaring your forgiveness in front of everyone you have ever known in this lifetime or in past lifetimes. Remember, forgiveness is to benefit you. If it also benefits the souls you are forgiving, that's great, but those souls have free will and can choose to accept or reject your forgiveness. In some cases, you can do this process face-to-face with other souls, but in a lot of cases, the recipients of the forgiveness will not be aware that you are doing the process, nor should you tell them. Their higher selves will be aware of your intentions and will either respond or not, depending on free will. It is not your concern whether or not the recipients actually benefit from your forgiveness or not. Your concern is to release yourself from emotional attachments, psychic hooks, and etheric and astral cording. Ultimately, all forgiveness is self-forgiveness, for ultimately all souls are reflections of your one shared self. Gestalt therapy with spiritual healing. This technique is a combination of traditional therapeutic psychology, psychotherapy, and spiritual healing. The therapist asks the client to remember a time when the issues that are being worked on were particularly apparent. This usually involves trauma from early childhood, but it could involve an event from young adulthood as well. An example would be sexual abuse during the period from age 7 through 10. The client then creates, or personifies, a version of the self that experienced these events, and dialogues with that self. That self is given various spiritual healing techniques, as well as general psychological counseling, including affirmative statements such as, "You are totally and completely innocent. You have done nothing wrong. You are a beautiful, creative being of light." Depending on the level of advancement of the soul undergoing therapy, it might be possible to include forgiveness processes and the sending of God's golden, radiant, loving light to the perpetrator of the abuse and witnesses who failed to intervene. This technique is not a substitute for counseling with a qualified professional psychologist or psychiatrist, but often helps speed up the recovery process and gives the client a broader, spiritual perspective on early lifetime trauma. The gist of this technique is that very often the inner children of a soul's past did not receive the love and nurturing they truly wanted, and so the adult self in therapy takes the role of a loving, nurturing parent and gives the inner children the love they so desperately wanted during childhood, and still want as an adult. Rebirthing. Rebirthing is a conscious breathing process based on Kriya Yoga, which was first brought to earth by the ascended master Babaji, known in various places by various names. This ninth density avatar taught a series of breathing rhythms and disciplines designed to raise the frequency of the physical body. Rebirthing is a somewhat diluted, but still highly effective, offshoot of Babaji's work that was brought to earth by Leonard Orr and later modified by various practitioners. Rebirthing involves deep, connected breathing rhythms that often trigger cellular memories from the birth process because a soul's first traumatic experience of life on Earth usually involved coming through the birth canal into physicality. Personal sessions with a trained rebirther are typically 60 to 90 minutes and may include affirmations and other basic guidance techniques in addition to keeping the client breathing in circular rhythms. You can practice a short form without a therapist, simply by closing your eyes, relaxing, and breathing fully, freely and deeply with no pauses between inhale and exhale. Do this for a couple of minutes. If you start to experience intense energy, slow the breathing down a bit and come out of the process. If you get sleepy, speed the breathing rhythm up until you feel energized. The important thing is to stay aware of your breath and the energy patterns moving through your body. If your mind gets too active, simply watch it as you move your attention back to the breath. Resistance to life force energy is the main cause of psychological pain. When you resist this natural breathing rhythm, the intense energy generated by the increase in the flow of prana through the body can be experienced as painful. If this occurs, temporarily slow down the breathing rhythm and see if you can perceive the pain as simply intense energy hitting blockages in the body. Learn to detach as much as possible from the patterns. Just observe them without judging or labeling. One form of rebirthing has you change your perception of intense energy into a feeling of pleasure instead of pain. You will discover, if you go deeply enough, that pleasure and pain are two sides of the same phenomenon. Soul retrieval and integration. There are various soul retrieval techniques being taught by counselors worldwide. The simplest of these involves reconnecting with those souls that may have triggered fragmentation of pieces of the client's soul. These might include family relationships, traumatic interactions with intimate partners, rape, incest, and any experience whereby the soul experiencing the trauma-dissociated parts of the self in order to escape the extreme pain associated with the trauma. The simplest form of soul retrieval literally involves projecting the mental body to the time and place where the perpetrator is currently residing, whether or not the conscious mind knows the location and circumstances, and asking for those soul fragments back. The perpetrator, holding the fragments, cannot actually refuse to give them back because that would be a violation of free will, but if the victim believes he or she is powerless to take the fragments back, it will be more difficult to do so. Various visualizations can often accompany this technique. After retrieving the soul fragments lodged in other souls, the client will then seek to return the fragments of other souls that are lodged in the client's own body. Sometimes soul fragments are held in the chakras, as etheric body imprints, and at other times there can be concentrated areas of physical energy, implants, usually associated with the astral body, which are essentially traumatic events embedded in the cells. By breathing deeply and visualizing the returning of these fragments, areas that are physically inflicted can begin to improve. Etheric and astral body depossession. Release of soul fragments in the astral level of the self is akin to depossession, or release of entities, thought forms and negative energy patterns. Letting go of cords, filaments, threads and hooks of energy belonging to other souls can be done through visualization, affirmation, invocation, chanting, and energetic movement, such as aura clearing and chakra balancing. Not all depossessions are simple and straightforward. If the client has a karmic connection with the entity or entities involved, they will not be easily removed. In that case, it may be necessary to investigate the present and past life connections between the souls involved in the karmic relationship. There are various ascended masters and archangels that specialize in soul integration and healing. You can, for example, ask Archangel Michael to clear all negative energies, entities and thought forms from the astral and etheric bodies. If you are experiencing repeated attacks by astral entities, there are more forceful techniques available. You can contact the channel for more information on astral depossession. Timeline healing. This is a process whereby certain aspects of yourself go back in time to heal other aspects that have experienced trauma or negative programming. All timeline healing therapies are based on the quantum physics principle of non-locality. One way of stating this principle is as follows: you have an infinite number of selves, one for every moment in creation, and there are an infinite number of moments. All these selves exist in this eternal now moment. Some scientists have postulated that the universe blinks on and off millions of times every second, which is essentially true. Every blink contains a soul experience, however brief it might seem to third-density consciousness. Those blinks, or past life selves that experienced trauma have received emotional scars, astral implants, etheric imprints and causal body blockages that tend to carry over into future lifetimes, or in the case of early childhood trauma in this lifetime, they carry over into adulthood. In timeline healing, the soul is guided into a deep meditation and is taken back in time to heal the traumatized selves. This is accomplished by using a standard induction process similar to hypnotherapy, along with guided imagery and affirmative statements. The aspects of self that go back in time are the meditative light body and the golden radiant God presence. To the past life self, these two higher aspects appear as shimmering beings of golden light, similar to angels. In some cases, the aspects of the self traveling back in time might choose to identify themselves as angels sent by God to give a healing to the past self. Often, the past self has no way of conceptualizing the idea of future versions of itself going back in time to give it a healing. Various healing techniques are included during the visitation with the past self. It is important to note that the aspects going back in time are not changing the physical details of the past self's experience, as this would be a violation of the free will of other souls involved in the past self's creations. Instead, the purpose is to change the past self's experience of what happened and to remove the emotional scars, astral implants, etheric imprints and causal body blockages that resulted. Once the healing is complete, the higher aspects of the client return to present time, and the soul now has a new timeline that includes the healing that was received by the past self. If the process does not go deep enough, it still works because the superficial version of this technique is the psychological process of reframing, which is often used by therapists to give people the happy childhood they always wanted but never received in the original third density linear past. When the timeline healing process does go deep enough, it is possible for the soul to remember receiving the healing, especially if the timeline visited involves early childhood in this lifetime. This is called closing the time loop. This channel has had a number of clients exclaim, "Aha!" when it finally becomes clear who the golden beings were that appeared when he or she was a young child. Now, later in adulthood, the timeline healing process has answered that question. Reverse timeline healing. This technique is essentially the opposite of regular timeline healing in that the journey back in time undertaken by the meditative light body of a soul is to a period in that soul's experience that was particularly enjoyable and empowering, rather than traumatic. The idea here is to bring the happy, powerful, successful self that was experienced at some point in the past, forward in time to the present, so that the energy can be accessed in the present. This is more than simply recalling a pleasant memory. The meditative light body and God presence actually go back in time and retrieve some of the wonderful energy of a past experience and then bring it forward in time and overlay it on the present physical body of the client. The client then uses this powerful, creative, happy energy to project forth his or her desires into the world. The technique is particularly useful for creating, manifesting specific things in life, such as the best possible career or business, or more loving relationships. Reverse timeline healing is based on the law of attraction. By putting out happy and loving energy into the world, it will return to the soul in various ways. Also emphasized in this technique is the fact that the most powerful and creative energies are emanated from the heart and solar plexus, rather than the mind. The mind is simply the mechanical device used to carry out the desires of the soul, or ego as the case may be. Part of reverse timeline healing involves ways of dealing with the ego when it tries to interfere with the intentions of the soul, as it invariably will. Future timeline linking. This is a relatively new technique given to this channel by the Arcturians, in which a link is created to specific future selves. Once again, it is based on the principles of quantum physics and specifically, the uncertainty principle. Until free will directs a soul's intention toward a specific goal or outcome, there are an infinite number of possible future timelines spreading out from the present moment like branches of a very large tree. As soon as the soul decides on a desired outcome, the possible timelines are narrowed down to a specific optimum path. Of course, there are still an infinite number of possible paths to the intersection point of manifestation in the future, but now the intersection point is established, meaning that there is a discrete and very real future self with which the soul can interact. Once the future self is established, dialogue is opened between the present and future selves. The future self, in essence, gives the present self advice on how to reach him or her. For example, if there is a specific goal of the present self, the future self will essentially say, "This is how I achieved that goal. First I did this and then I did that," etc. There can be an ongoing relationship between the present and future selves to keep the present self on course. The future self becomes just like a spirit guide or benevolent ET and can be invoked in a similar manner. This is similar to shamanic techniques in some traditions. Each of the above techniques can be facilitated by this channel, or he will be glad to refer you to someone who is qualified to guide you through these processes. As always, it is not our intention to make you dependent on a therapist or healer. You have the greatest healer within you already. The purpose of a practitioner is to help you get in touch with your own inner healer, your God self. As the fourth density souls clear their negativity, many will be ready to move onto the ascension spiral. The following section is specifically for those souls who are already on the path of ascension. For the rest of you reading this, who are vibrating at fourth density, sooner or later you will also begin the following processes.